So I will get things rolling. Our first speaker, I'm very pleased to present is Dr. Gabriel Bo. Gabriel Bo, he may actually be quite a familiar face to some of you. He has travelled throughout Australia quite over the last couple of years, and I think has been certainly responsible for the uptake of AI technologies in this country. So Gabriel is currently the President and the Director of Research at IRAC, which is a research institution in Argentina. He is a Professor of Obstetrics and Biotechnology at the Reproduction Veterinary School of Cordoba. He was the past President of the International Embryo Transfer Society and a founding member of the Argentine Embryo Transfer Society. He has published over 100 manuscripts and had more than 150 invited reviews. So I welcome Gabriel to start his first talk on fixed time AI, and I hope you enjoy it. If we could possibly hold our questions to the end of the seminar, we'll have all the speakers up on the stage and have a bit of a panel discussion about what we've learned today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And turn off the phones as well. I just remember when I came, I'm gonna come down here because it's easier for me to walk around and give my talk. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming here. We got a nice big crowd. So I first would like to thank you for all spending some time discussing these things with us, and also especially thank you to Vetoquino for inviting me to come in again to Australia. I don't remember what number is this trip, but I've been coming here, I think, since 2006, 2007. And my first time I went to WA to an embryo transfer meeting, and then we came over to Brisbane and Rockhampton, and then we just kept coming almost every year. So that gave me a good opportunity to see what's the industry like in Australia and have an idea, which we got a lot of similarities and some differences as well. So as Sophie said, the idea of my talk is to bring you some of the new things that we're working on. But first I'm going to start with the basic stuff, which you already know, and which is all related to economics and how we want to do all these procedures. And first of all, if we want to have cows on grass, we should have an inter-calving interval of 12 months. So that means that we need to have the cows calving at the same time every year to have the best use of our pastures. And, but we have some problems. And one of the problems is that gestation takes about 280, 290 days in the Brahman breed, for example. So most of the year is taken by gestation. And we haven't been able to get a shorter gestation right now. We probably can make a clone or something with a sheep or something like that. We could get it 5 months and will be a lot easier, but we can't. At the moment, we are unable to. So after the cow calf, we are gonna have about 85 days to get her pregnant. But in those 85 days, we had to wait for uterine involution after parturition. So that's about 30 days. So that we end up with 55 days. Now, we don't really have 55 days because normally a beef cow will take longer to start cycling again. And if she calves in very good body condition, which is not the case all the time, she will probably start cycling about 50 to 60 days after calving. So that means that we end up with 25 days. And the estrus cycle is about 21 days. So that means that we have one shot to get that cow pregnant and get her calving at the same time the next year. That's why it's so bloody difficult. Okay? So just looking at the numbers, it's not that easy to get them pregnant every year. We think that it's not the case, but when we look at the math, this is how it works. So then we need to make sure that those cows are cycling and are conceiving as early as possible. And this is very old data from Dr. Wilbank from the US, the father of Milo Wilbank, actually. And he, back in 1987, he said that there are two things that are important in order to have the cows conceiving right after calving. And one is that they would cycle in the first 21 days of the mating season, and the other one is that they would conceive to that service. And what are the main factors? Time of calving. So the earlier they calve, more time they have to recover. Time of calving, again, same importance to conception. Then nutrition. Body condition at calving will set the clock in when when she's going to start cycling. Even if we give them the best feed we can find after calving, if at the time of calving she's skinny, it will take her 90 or 120 days to cycle. And we had to do something about it. And then the weight change near breeding will affect conception rate. Why? Because if cows are losing weight after insemination, then they will have great embryonic losses, and then she's not going to get pregnant. Then we have age in the first calvers, of course, because it takes more time for them to recover after calving. And then we have bull fertility or semen quality. We are not going to talk about those aspects today, but we are going to talk mainly on how we can get the cows pregnant as early as possible. So then again, there are also a lot of economic losses that sometimes we don't take into account because we don't have to pay for them, but it's less money than we make at the end of the year. And we had to bear in mind that if we miss an opportunity, it takes 21 days to have another opportunity. So for every 21 days of the breeding season that the cow remains open, her calf will be 21 days younger at weaning. And that means that we are going to have a calf that is going to be between 15 to 21 kilos lighter at weaning time. And then you multiply for whatever you get paid for your calves, and this is a lot of money when you count all the cows that you have on the farm. And these are things that we had to keep in mind every time we want to plan our mating season and the whole program. So again, when we start the breeding season, we want to know how many cows are already cycling and how many cows are still in postpartum anestrus. And when you ask most producers, they will say, well, maybe most of my cows are cycling. But when they get somebody to check them and they do ultrasound examination, we find that this is not always the case. And if you have a well-managed farm, probably in southern Australia, on the southern part of Australia, you may have 50% of them cycling, and the other 50% will be in anestrus. You're in the northern part of Australia, as well as the northern part of Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, and all the countries I've been, you never get higher than 20% of them cycling at the beginning of the breeding season. Okay? That's a normal thing for commercial herds. So when we are going to breed cows, we know that most of them are going to be in postpartum anestrus when we start the breeding season, especially if we want to start as early as possible. Because if we want to have cows conceiving by 85 days, we know that conception rate is not 100%, so we want to have a first shot as early as possible. So we may want to start breeding them earlier than 60 days. So we want to get them cycling at 40, 45 days to make sure that they get bred as early as possible. So that's why we've been using progesterone-releasing devices to get them to cycle. Why? Because progesterone will give them a kickstart. And there's two programs that are around the world that have been used for fixed-time AI and also to induce them to cycle. One is mainly used, it's a GnRH protocol that is used in dairy cattle a lot, but it's also used in the countries where estradiol is not available. And in the countries where we still have the luxury of using estradiol, this is the protocol that most people would use, especially Argentina, Brazil, all South America, and Mexico as well, and here in Australia. So this is the basic protocol where we're going to insert a progesterone-releasing device like the Q-mates. So we put the Q-mates on day 0, which we call day 0, which is any day of the estrous cycle. Then the cows get an injection of estradiol to set the follicular wave. Then 7 or 8 days later, we are going to give them prostaglandin and equine chorionic gonadotropin, or Pregnacol, this is a trademark for that, and a second injection of estradiol, and then we can breed them all at about 54 to 60 hours after the removal of the Q-mate. So this is a protocol which was set up many years ago, and is a protocol that has been mostly used in most of the fixed-time AI programs that we do. And the reason that the program works is that it requires, if the cows are in good body condition, they will start cycling right after at the time of the treatment. So when we have a cow that is in anestrus, she's going to have low progesterone levels. Progesterone is what is produced by the CL, and after the first ovulation, she's going to have a short cycle. So that means that she's going to come back in heat at about 8 to 12 days. And then she's going to start cycling every 21 to 23 days. If we breed her on this first cycle, she will not conceive. Why? Because this corpus luteum is going to regress before the embryo has a chance to induce maternal recognition pregnancy. Now, if we have an anestrus cow that is treated with a Q-mate, progesterone levels are going to rise. This will stimulate follicular growth. And then when we give the estradiol injection at the end, we are going to get her to ovulate. And because this progesterone is priming the uterus, then she's going to have what we call a fertile cycle. Because if she conceives, then the embryo has a chance to induce maternal recognition of pregnancy because this corpus luteum will last at least 17 or 18 days, which is enough for the embryo to induce the maternal recognition of pregnancy. If she doesn't conceive, then she's going to come back in heat at 21 days, and then we have another chance to get her pregnant. Remember that we had 25 days, so if we miss the first chance, we still have the second chance to get her pregnant within that window that we are talking, within those 85 days postpartum. So that's why progesterone works really well. And there's a lot of data now from Australia, from around the world, and this is old data from Brazil that we have shown many times. And in this data shows the impact that you're going to have by starting your breeding program with a fixed-time AI and then using bulls. Here, this is a survival curve. So this, we started with 100 cows empty. And then as the breeding season goes along, they will get pregnant. So what we want is that this curve goes down faster. That means that we get more cows pregnant, okay? So then we have the red line when cows were started with a fixed-time AI, and we get about 50%. Then they come back in heat, those that did not conceive, and then they are bred by the bulls, and then the others go along the 90-day breeding season. Here we have in the green line the cows that were only exposed to bulls, and at the beginning the bulls didn't get many pregnant because they were not cycling. So when they started to cycle, then the lines started to go down. But then when we looked at the differences in these two curves, and we looked at 45 days in the breeding season, there's a 45% difference in conception rate between the two treatments. So that means that we get about 70% of the cows pregnant on day 45 in the fixed-time AI protocol with the bulls, and only about 40% of them pregnant with the bulls. So that means a lot of money when you're looking at your winning and you're weighing the cows at the end. At the end of the breeding season, the difference was about 8%. So we get about an 8 to 10% increase. Depends on how you manage your herd. But it's not abnormal to get up to 90% pregnancy rate in these herds when you start them with a fixed-time AI. So when you compare that, the other thing that is very important is to consider that next year you had to breed the cows again. And this is the breeding season again, okay? And the problem is when you have cows that haven't calved by the time that you put the bulls again. If those cows have not calved by that time, then they are going to have 60 days to recover, and then their chances of getting pregnant within that breeding season are going to be much lower. So this is another important thing. So if you look at the two curves, if you look at the red line and the green line, you see that in the red line you have about 15% of the cows that have not calved, and on the green line you have 25% of the cows that have not calved. So then the chances of getting those cows pregnant in the next year are lower in the cows that were exposed to the bulls. And this is very important when you have to consider the whole scheme or the whole scenario. The other thing is the impact of fixed time on winning weights. And this is two experiments that we've done some years ago in Argentina. One was in an Angus herd in southern Argentina, and the other one was a crossbred herd with Bons Mara in northern Argentina. And in both cases, half the cows were exposed to bulls, and the other half they got a kickstart with a fixed-time AI, and then they got bulls for the rest of the breeding season. And in both cases, very different breeds, very different environment, we got about 30 kilos difference. So that means that our winning weights or the calves were about 30, 35 kilos heavier at the time of winning. And these are the calves that you are actually winning. So if it's not counting the 8% increase that you have in pregnancy rate, because then you had to add up. So you are going to have heavier calves and more calves as well. So that means more money that you bring back when you sell the calves. Now, this has been data that we have done with what we call the traditional or the conventional protocol. But we are now exploring new alternatives to see how we can improve pregnancy rates. And this is something that we've been working in the past 3 or 4 years that I wanted to show you. Just one of the things that I'm interested in is that you think about the concept more than the protocol, because the protocols, they take some variations and some little things that may not be that important now for the talk. But I want to just bring you the concept. When we are looking at fixed time AI, one of the problems that we have is that we wanted to synchronize ovulation as much as we could. And because we wanted to synchronize ovulation as much as we could, we ended up shortening a period that is very important for the cows to conceive, which is called the Pro Estrus Period, which is the period between the time of luteal regression, that's when the corpus luteum or progesterone starts going down, until they come in heat. And normally in a cow, it's about 3 to 4 days in a normally cycling cow. Now, when we use this fixed time AI, we are shortening that period by about 28 hours. And one of the things that we have looked at is what's the impact that this would have on fertility. So we say that to have a follicle, a good dominant follicle at the time of ovulation is very important, but there may be other aspects relating to the uterus or relating to other things that are important for embryo development and the establishment of pregnancy. And there's some information that came about 10 years ago from the US, from Mike Days. They looked at conception rate based on diameter of the follicle at the time of ovulation, but also looked in Pro Estrus length. So how they did, they injected GnRH at different times after removal of the devices, so then they look at fertility. And if you see here, there is a trend that the longer that the Pro Estrus is, the higher the fertility you get, okay? So one of the things that we found, if you compare the cows that have the lowest conception rate were the cows that have the shorter Pro Estrus interval, where the cows that have the highest conception rate were, or heifers in this case, were the heifers that have the highest Pro Estrus length. And then there's another information that came from Marcos Colasso in Canada, and he tried to make a prediction. And he said that if Pro Estrus is about 72 hours, he found a probabilistic prediction of 80% of conception. Doesn't mean that we're going to get 80% of the cows pregnant, but it means that we are going to have better chances of getting the heifers pregnant. This is a heifer program, if we do a program like that. So then what we did, we adapted the protocol that we consider the traditional protocol, what we've been using for many years, which I showed you before. And instead of having the progesterone devices for 7 or 8 days, we shortened that period to 6 days. So we want to have a fresher follicle. And then instead of giving estradiol on day 9, we were not giving anything, and we were letting the cows come in heat on their own. And if they were not in heat by 72 hours, then we hit them with GnRH and start an AI at that time. So that gave them a longer period of estradiol exposure before they actually ovulate. And we found that that will also create a dominant follicle that grows faster, because the moment that you take progesterone out, then the system works in a way that the follicle will get a good kickstart, because that follicle needs to grow, and then it needs to ovulate and produce a pregnancy. That's what we want. So then we had many people calling many different names and many different protocols. Even in Australia, we have the Bo sync protocols that some of you have found. But we have the Select Sync, the Pro Sync, the many sync protocols that you can think of. There are about 300 sync protocols. So in this case, we didn't know how to call it. And because my graduate student his name was Javier, we say, well, what the hell? We call it J-Sync. To make it a name. But that doesn't mean. The idea is that it's a protocol that allows a longer Pro Estrus, so that exposes the cows to higher estradiol levels for a longer period of time, and hopefully we can improve fertility. And this is what we found. We found that we have a beneficial effect on the uterine environment, and that, in other words, we are going to have an uterus that is friendlier for that embryo to develop and make it into a pregnancy. So we did different trials. in Argentina and Uruguay. This was the first trial in which we purposely shortened that period to 48 hours or 60 hours, or we let them go to 72 hours. So in this case, all the heifers were fixed time AI at different time, and then the rest of the protocol was the same. And then we looked at the pregnancy rate, and in here is the pregnancy rate, and you can see here that when we have the heifers inseminated at 48 or 60 hours, we got lower pregnancy rate compared to those inseminated at 72 hours. So we were able to significantly increase conception rate to that fixed time AI using this approach. Now, there's one caveat to this. You need to use ECG to stimulate the follicle to grow at the time of removal of your QMate device. It's also probably better in heifers if you use a low progesterone, like a one-pot QMate, for example, which you can do in Australia, especially if they are Bos indicus heifers. And the other thing that is important, that you may not need to give GnRH to all of them. If you use tail pain or you use Estrotect on some of the patches, you go at 72 hours. Those that are already in heat, then you just directly AI, and you only give GnRH to those that are not yet in heat, okay? We're going to see some more data on that. We did an experiment in Uruguay in which we did about 2,500 heifers in different farms in Uruguay. And basically, we compared this new protocol with the conventional protocol. And then we looked at pregnancy rates. And here are the results that don't show here for some reason. Anyway. Something happened to this slide, but if you believe me, there was a 6% increase in pregnancy rate in here. But I'll show you some more data anyway. We also look at another information in experiment that we did in Brazil, and I hope this is going to show up. And in Brazil, we did the same with Nelore heifers. This was an experiment that we did just a few months ago. And in here, we inserted the implants in the afternoon of day 0. Then we pull out the implants in the afternoon of day 6, so 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then we start inseminating the heifers at 8 in the morning. And we put tail pain here, so all the heifers that were rubbed off, with the tail pain rubbed off, they got AI at that time. The ones that were not in heat by then, they got GnRH and they were AI'd in the afternoon. And then we compare with the conventional protocol in which we did the same. We looked at the ones that were coming in heat, that were AI, the ones that were not coming in heat, we gave GnRH and AI them in the afternoon. And here are the results. The heifers were in very good shape. They were Nelore heifers. They were 2 years old and they were in very good shape. So we got about, most of them ended up showing estrus in the morning, and we got 67% pregnant, those that were in heat with this protocol, compared to 49 in the conventional. We ended up with a 63% pregnancy rate with this protocol compared to the 48% in the conventional protocol. So this is the data on the beef heifers that you haven't seen. I'll probably bring that up in my next talk, was a 7% difference. So that doesn't mean that it's the solution to all the problems, okay? It means that we can probably get a bit higher pregnancy rate by applying this combination of technologies, but letting them come in heat and probably allow them a little longer period than what we normally do. It depends also on which situation you are. Like, I mean, it also depends if you are able to do some heat detection, or it's better for you to do just a time breathing. If you're going to use a time breathing, probably the conventional protocol is probably the best in this case, okay? The other things that we've been working is on the use of sexing or sex semen. You know that sex semen has been available for a long time, and it's been used in dairy cows for many, many years, in dairy heifers mainly for many years, but it hasn't been used much in beef cattle until recently. And one of the companies that sell sex semen, now there's 2 companies that have sex semen in the world, but one of them had recently changed some of the procedures in their sexing process, and they have cut down many of the steps that they have to produce sex semen. So now they say that the system is friendlier to the sperm, and the other thing is that they were able to increase the number of sperm in dose. The traditional sex semen dose had 2.1 million sperm. Now they were able to increase that to 4 million sperm. And we did an agreement with Sexing Technologies to do a research trial in Argentina to look at the possibility of using sex semen in beef heifers. So we did this with Angus heifers, and we use again this same protocol, the long Pro Estrus protocol. So we use a progesterone releasing device that were inserted on day 0. They got estradiol. On day 6, we gave prostaglandin. We used tail paint. We used 300 units of ECG at the time of removal. And then, because we wanted to know when is the best time to inseminate, we have never done an experiment with sex semen, so we wanted to learn a bit from here. We did a estrus observation based on tail paint. We never looked at them. We just run them through the chute and write up the numbers. That's the only thing that we have done. So we looked at them at 60 hours, and then at 72 hours, all of the heifers that were in heat at 60 hours were inseminated at 72. All the heifers that were in heat at 72 were also inseminated at 72. And the ones that were not in heat at 72, they got GRH and were inseminated in the afternoon. So we inseminated most of them in the morning, a few of them in the afternoon. But the difference from the other trials is that we also looked at which ones were in heat earlier. Okay? We have 4 bulls, and we have sex and non-sex semen from the same 4 bulls, okay? Because this is also important. You don't want to compare apple and oranges, so you want to have the same bull with the same semen that was produced at least within the same time, okay? Sometimes it's hard to split the ejaculates, but we tried to split the ejaculates as much as we could, so we didn't have any variation. So that's what we did. And this is how we picked tail paint. And the funny thing here is that you had to make a decision. And it usually is only one person that needs to make a decision. Otherwise it gets very complicated. With the patches, it's a bit easier, but we tend to use tail paint because it's a lot cheaper. So then, these heifers were not in heat because they have more than 50% of the paint. These heifers were in heat. There's no question about it because they have nothing left. And these ones, we also consider them in heat, but these ones, we always have a question. So usually what we decide is that these heifers, we just move them to the afternoon. We assume that they were not in heat. Many of these heifers, in this group and even in this group, then they came clean in the afternoon. So it means that they were just starting to come in heat. And by the time that they were bred in the afternoon, they were already in heat. Okay? So in this protocol, we have about 72% of them in heat by then, and these were the results. So if you look at here, the overall pregnancy rate was 58% to the conventional semen, 49% to the sex semen. So if you take the rate of what's the relationship between non-sex and sex, it's about 84%. Okay? So that means that for every 100 heifers that UAI with sex semen, you're gonna get 84% of them pregnant compared to what you would get with a conventional semen. Now, if you look at the ones that are in estrus, then we got 69% in the ones that were inseminated with a conventional semen and 59% in the ones that were inseminated with a sex ultra. So that means that we got higher than 50% pregnancy rate, which is what we wanted to achieve. Of course, these heifers were in the best possible conditions, okay, because we want to use the best possible heifers to see how we can perform. I'm not going to say that you're going to get these results every time you do it, because the heifers, the body condition, and if they had to be all cycling, they had to be all in good shape to get these results, but it's possible to get these results. Again, if you look at the ones that were in estrus and you just combine them, you look at 50% conception rate with the sex ultra, and the ones that were not in estrus, we got 42% with a non-sex semen. So the approach that we are taking now is we are doing this, and then all the heifers that are wrapped off, they get inseminated with sex semen. All the ones that are not in heat, they get inseminated with non-sex semen. And then by doing that combination, we get about 75% of the heifers inseminated with sex semen, and then another 25% get inseminated with normal semen. But by doing that, we are changing the ratio of heifers because we are going to get a lot of more heifer calves if this is what you want. The other things that we have been looking at is the possibilities of having a second round or a third round of insemination after the first breeding. And there's different possibilities that you can use. If you're a commercial breeder, you don't want to bother too much, and then you may want to just throw bulls in and let them do the job. And if you put 2 to 3% bulls, they will do a good job for the rest of the breeding season. If you are a stud breeder, you may want to have more animals inseminated and get more pregnancies through AI, so then you may think about a resync. The simple way of re-inseminating animals is to come about 18 to 25 days after the first breeding. Those that are showing hit your AI. But then you had to work, and you had to look for estrus, and you're going to miss some. You'll never get more than 60% of them. We never get higher than 60% of the return. So that means that if you AI 100 animals, you're going to get about 30% of them coming back between 18 to 24 days. So one alternative is to do a scan, to do an ultrasound scanning as early as possible and get them back in calf as soon as you can. So then there were several protocols, and one of the protocols that we've been using, there are other protocols as well, is to insert the Q-mates again on day 22, and you give a shot of estradiol. And on day 30, you are going to scan the animals. Those that are open, they get prostaglandin, and then they get estradiol, and then they are re-inseminated by day 32. Those that are pregnant, you just keep them. And by doing that, you can do this as many times as you want. Of course, you're not going to do them 5 times, but you can do 2 or 3 times, and especially with heifers, because if you want to use bulls that are easy calving bulls, you don't want to have calving problems, then you want to have more heifers pregnant through AI. I wouldn't recommend doing this in wet cows. Of course, you can do it as well, but it gets a little more complicated. We use mainly in heifers, but some people are also using the cows as well. So these are 2 sets of data from Brazil where they are mainly using this protocol. And this was down in southern Brazil, where they have cows that were divided in 3 groups. One group were just exposed to the bull. The other group, they get a kickstart with a fixed time AI, and then they put the bulls. And then the other group, they did a fixed time and a resync, and then they put the bulls. And these are the pregnancy rates on the first 30 days when they scanned at 30 days. So these were the cows that were pregnant during the first week. 40% to the fixed time AI, only 3% to the bull, but it's only 1 week, okay? At 70 days, they got 66 compared to 48 to 16. At the end of the breeding season, 45% compared to 75 to 81%. And because of that, some stud breeders in Brazil have said, oh, if we are getting this good pregnancy rate, why don't we just forget about the bulls and use 3 inseminations? And this is what they have done. This is data from an Elor farm in Brazil, and they have 3 different groups. One group, they started with fixed time AI, and then they put bulls. The other group, they did 2 rounds of AI and then bulls. And the last one, they did 3 rounds of AI and no bulls, okay? And they have a 64-day breeding season. So it means that they were AIing at 32 days and then another 32 days to the 3rd round. This is the data. So again, in here, these are the pregnancy rates. These are the pregnancy rate to the first breeding. So they got very good conception rate to the first breeding. And these are the pregnancy rates at the end of the breeding season. So these were the 3 rounds of AI. These are 2 rounds of AI plus the bulls. And this is 1 round of AI plus the bulls. So there was no significant difference here. But they got 87% of the cows pregnant through AI and without using any bulls. So this is a possibility that you can use. This is to show you how you can push the system to get the best outcome. So just to finish, in summary, we need to have a 12-month interval to get the highest possible number of cows pregnant within 85 days. We need adequate nutrition in order to do that, because this is not only treatments. You also need to have a good body condition of the cows. We can use the treatments for fixed-time AI to decrease the postpartum interval, and we can inseminate the cows, or we can even put bulls in. I mean, if you don't have the possibility of doing AI, we can even think about getting them a kickstart with the Q-mates and then put bulls in. You need to put, maybe you need to put about 5% bulls at the beginning, and then you can take out some bulls. And if we combine tail paint or patches for estrus detection, we can use sex semen in those that are coming in heat and get about 50% of them conceiving to the sex semen. And we can also use resynchronization treatments. And if we do that, we can get about 70% of the cows pregnant with 2 rounds of AI, and about 85% of the cows pregnant with 3 rounds of AI. So I think this is possible, and now we have the tools to do it. It's just a matter of getting ourselves organized and do it, and make sure that you have good fertility in your cows and good fertility semen as well, which is also important. So this is just to show you how the market has changed in Argentina in the last few years, and you probably have seen this slide many times from many people, but we started with fixed-time AI back in 2000, 2001. The first fixed-time AI protocols were developed in 1995, and you see how we increased the number of cows inseminated, and most of the beef cows that are inseminated in Argentina now are through fixed-time AI. We still have some people that do estrus detection, but if you compare the number of devices sold and the number of semen sold, we get about 80%. There's probably about 20% that may not use fixed-time AI, but this is how the uptake has been. It doesn't mean that all the cows are inseminated, because we are talking about 12 to 15% of our cow herd. So we still have 85% of the cows that are still bred by the bull. And with that, I would like to thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I think we're going to do it at the end, right?